Yeah, no problem. Thank you. So I'm Jim Hartshorne and I run the commercial function of Unipart. I'll tell you a bit about Unipart as we go through the deck. I've been in the supply chain logistics industry for 25 years. I had 17 years of those with DHL as managing director, finally in my last role of the UK. And I've been in this commercial role, which is a really interesting responsibility for account management and our growth agenda, all things customer globally across our business. So thanks for taking the time to come and see me this afternoon. I have to say I was getting a little bit nervous. 1 minute before the start, there was two people sitting in there. It felt like an episode of Love Island, and I was kind of the one that nobody wanted to match up with. So, thanks to some friendly faces that have come into the room. So I'm going to talk to you about Unipart and where particularly we help customers with supply chain resilience. It's a world that's full of turmoil and change, and we've found some real success in helping our customers to adapt their supply chains and change the way they work. So hopefully, this is perhaps the graveyard shift. Everybody's looking to get to the bar. Hopefully you'll have something to reflect on, and rather than sit there drowning your sorrows after listening to me banging on for 10 or 15 minutes. Like many organisations in the supply chain industry, Unipart is often a hidden partner. People often look at me blankly when I mention that I work for Unipart. They're kind of like, well, what does that mean? When I was in the parcel industry and supply chain with a well-known brand, people used to say, well, why did you deliver my laptop to the builder next door? So I don't kind of get that. I don't suffer that problem anymore. But actually, when I then explain what Unipart do, people often then realise that we probably touch their lives in some way or other, whether it's through the products we handle or some of the products that we manufacture on behalf of key customers. Some of the older members of the audience might recognise Unipart for some of our heritage. We originally were a retailer that sold car components across the UK. We've left that well behind us now. Some of you might see our brand on garage forecourts, on things like screen wash. We literally just license that brand now, and actually that's kind of our old world. And what we are now is a supply chain performance improvement partner. And we operate to world-class standards. In 2023, Unipart became the first organisation ever to be recognised with a world-class safety, well-being and sustainability treble by the British Safety Council. We've got very ambitious near-term and net zero targets that have been validated under the SBTI scheme as well. So we're very proud of our impact on the world and the way that we look after those that work for us. We are a British business, and we describe ourselves as a British business, but with global operations. We operate across 22 countries. As you can see on the screen, last year we secured revenues of just over £1 billion. And actually, for the first time, we secured more of our profits outside of the UK than within it. Our heritage, as I said, was in automotive, and actually some of those big established customers took us on our global journey. Take Jaguar Land Rover, JLR, when they expanded into an aftermarket model controlled centrally, we assisted them in deploying our capability in lots of new markets. And today we employ more than 12,000 people. And in our core sectors, we're a well-known organisation, but many people, kind of Joe Public, won't know Unipart or recognise the role that we play. But actually, when I describe some of the solutions that we provide to our customers, you will see that we probably engage with you somewhere. So if you are fortunate enough to drive a car that's manufactured by Jaguar Land Rover, Unipart and it's a fuel-based vehicle, Unipart has made the fuel tank for that vehicle, probably. We also make some of the engine components. And if you take that car to an official dealer anywhere in the world, any component that's fitted to the car has probably been handled by by Unipart at some point in its JLR supply chain. So we run a global spare parts centre in the UK where every market around the world is serviced centrally. And we have a similar service for the likes of McLaren. We also then provide the secondary distribution for JLR in markets such as China, Japan, South Africa. So we have a real sizable footprint with a major British manufacturer like that. The really lucky few of you that are in the audience that might own a McLaren sports car, if you've got a couple of £100,000 kicking around to buy one of those beautiful cars, then equally the parts that go into that as it's serviced anywhere in the world have been handled by Unipart, and some of the body panels on those cars are also manufactured by us. We have a specialist high-end composite materials manufacturing company, and they're one of our key customers. But it's probably our work in the consumer electronics and healthcare sectors that people are most likely to have engaged indirectly with Unipart. We have the warranty and repair partnership with Apple for the UK and for Saudi Arabia. So if you're under Apple Care and you crack the screen or the phone becomes faulty, it will come back into a Unipart centre where we triage it and do repairs and then send it back out or replace the handset. So you can understand, we're here in a retail focused environment. Taking a teenager's most precious possession and repairing it and sending it back to them. You can see we take a lot of care and responsibility for people's possessions. And we also support that fantastic customer with all of their product launches and their store replenishment across the UK.
Jim, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Because there's an awful lot of information that Jim's just shared with you there. So looking at the slide here, the Unipart way, that's, I guess, your values, is it?
Yeah, so
Just talk us through that.
Yeah, so we, at the core of how we work is the Unipart way, and it's the methodology by which we work, think, and perform. Mm-hmm. And all of our processes and policies, the way that we engage with our staff, and our continuous improvement methodology is all driven through the Unipart way. And so whether or not we're operating a manufacturing plant or a distribution centre, we use the Unipart way and its core foundations to manage the way they work. And even up at board level, we use a process called the cell to manage the performance of our business. So it's the same from the top of the organisation right to the bottom.
Yeah. When did you hatch, if that's the right word, the one Unipart way?
So just a couple of months ago, we celebrated our 50th anniversary. Right. And and that Unipart way was born at our conception as an organisation. It was the way that we were originally part of a state-owned manufacturing business, and we had union troubles within that wider organisation, and we differentiated ourselves as we became privatised by trying to change the employee engagement. And actually on the back of that Unipart way, we're in the top 10% of most engaged organisations within Britain. Wow. And if you think that most of our people are either working in a rail distribution centre or in a warehouse, we're really proud of that. And that's why we have also world-class safety. We believe those two things are really linked, that if employees are highly engaged, they also work really safely.
That's really interesting, because that was my next question about the safety. I'm familiar with, obviously, ROSPA. I'm not familiar with the Swords of Honour. Is that similar? It's a very prestigious safety mark. And is safety a consequence, or is it a strategy? Does that make sense? Is it a consequence of everything you do, or is it part of your core strategy is to constantly maintain a safe place to work and blah, blah, blah?
It's actually a core belief. It's a belief and a value of our organisation that an employee should go home in the same condition that they came to work. And we work in a big part of our business is the rail industry. So if you've travelled on the train in the UK or in the US, you've probably in some way been assisted by Unipart. We replace a lot of the wheels, we do refits, and we supply spare parts for the rail industries around the world. And that's a high safety critical industry that requires, the very highest levels of safety in everything that we do. We make signalling equipment, for example.
Right.
And so, being aligned to our customer, our customers expect the highest level of safety, and so therefore we demonstrate that and drive that through our business.
Okay, cool. Any questions at this juncture from the audience? Not at the moment? Okay, brilliant. Right, crack on.
So, our global footprint, we can see that we're a diverse and capable business. We position ourselves, as I say, as a supply chain performance improvement partner. We operate in automotive, aerospace, healthcare, technology, industrial, defence. Talks about rail and obviously retail and e-commerce and why we're here today. But what I wasn't here just to talk about Unipart, right? I wanted to take some time to talk about how the Unipart way and the skills and experience we've built up over 50 years can help retailers to adapt to the volatile world and build some resilience into the supply chain. For many years, the retail industry's been on that pursuit of lean and efficient supply chains. It's been the holy grail of the retail and consumer industry. The goal was always to minimize cost, accelerate speed to market, all the things you guys in the industry know. However, the world is changing, and with the last 5-10 years, we've had some pretty serious curveballs that we'll live through and had to adapt to. And no longer just running in a world where cost down is the only imperative. Is that enough? We have to be able to adapt, and if we take what's happened in just the very last few weeks with a swipe of a pen in an office in the US, the whole global trading system's been thrown into chaos, right? And those that win are those that have the resilience built into their supply chain. And then when you throw on top of that the intensity of sustainability and the climate crisis that's coming our way, all of these things tell us and our customers that we have to change the way we put solutions together to enable us to be the most resilient that we can.
Can I just jump in there again? I'm sorry about this.
No, it's all right.
But so you mentioned there that those that win are the most resilient. Equally, you've got to balance resilience with agility as well. So have you got and apologies if it's one of your case studies that you're going to talk about. Right. Have you got an example of where you've shown agility because of, a curveball that a client's been hit with, that you were able to, leverage your resilience, but also show agility?
Yeah, we have. So we have a contract with an American-based organisation where we were building safety equipment for them, and the operating model we designed was that we would build in the UK and then ship into the US. Unfortunately, the Make in America policy that the president brought in meant that those products were no longer compliant. And so within just a couple of months, we've been able to redesign the product to make it simpler to manufacture away from our core base. We've transitioned one of our existing facilities in the US to assemble those products. We've changed the product, gone through the whole tariff process to ensure that we're compliant, and we've shipped into the US and continue to service that client and not have to jeopardize that contract.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, great piece of work and a lot of long nights by the team.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So as I say, we've used our supply chain expertise to nearshore product sourcing, to diversify supply chains and change manufacturing processes. And that example, is perfect timing in that, that helped us to be agile and yet still provide that customer with an agile and sustainable supply chain. Obviously, closer to home, we're all still suffering from, in Northern Europe, we're all suffering from labour shortages across the supply chain, whether it's drivers, warehouse colleagues, etc. What we're seeing is retailers are adapting at an ever-increasing pace to try and accommodate that world, whether it's changing their investment strategies or looking at redesigning their entire value supply chain. What we've found is that, retailers are going from a just-in-time mentality, but also having to compensate that with a just-in-case as well to enable supply. And we're trying to use our capability to help them change the way we work. So a lot of organisations tell me that they have, visibility is the key. If they can see their supply chain and they can see their position, then they can adapt their business accordingly. However, it's one of those things that's easier to say than actually do. And so what we try and do is use technology and our expertise to stitch that together into a solution where a customer can see the variability within their supply chain and actually convert that into reality. I've had the analogy given to me that customers are given a jigsaw puzzle. Each one of them is the bit of visibility they need, but it only really makes sense when you put it all together, but no one's given them the picture. And so what we try and do is to provide the technology and the expertise to be able to hang that together into a credible visibility of their end-to-end supply chain, and then put solutions together that allow them to be more diverse. So we run a piece of business, a global operation for a major customer of ours, where we're able to give them full visibility right down to a level where an individual component is missing from a dealership. And we can then route those orders through and satisfy an order to the point of dispatch within 24 hours to send it through air freight, or we could route it on the slow boat, out on sea freight to get the balance between cost and service, maintain a service level in the high 99s, but give them complete visibility of that all the way through in markets as diverse as Argentina, Peru, China, and the UK, all working against the same service levels on a global scale. And we're talking about thousands of orders per day being processed. And that really came about through working in partnership with that customer to allow us to have visibility of some pretty sensitive data, right, where customers are being let down, but they want to share that with us and enable us to then respond and be agile within the supply chain to allow them to make critical decisions based on a set of predefined rules.
So just on that example there, so this was a customer-specific driven challenge that you guys developed in conjunction with the customer, this solution. Is that sort of global real-time visibility, 24-hour sea or longer-term sea freight, that kind of smart supply chain management, do you white label that now? Do you own that IP, or is it only exclusive for that customer?
The actual solution is very specific to that customer. It's been built up over years with them. However, we do have that technology to be able to deploy that for other customers. And it gives them, and we've done this with a number of customers now, so we've been able to export that capability elsewhere. But for example, when the tariffs changed into the US and the imports went up on aluminium, we were able to tell that customer which products had high aluminium content and would be hit by the tariff, and we're able to stop it at port and get it brought back out from a port and then resend it.
What with the aluminium replaced, or?
So they would source it from a different country, the same product, or they would. But the point is, they had the control to make the decision.
Right.
We could tell them what the impact was going to be at that point in time. Wow. So there were with the tariff changes, there were windows that allowed you to export in advance. So we could work out quite quickly the cost benefit of air freighting it, getting it into the market before the tariff came in, rather than sea freight it.
Wow, that's very good. Just pause 1 second. Any questions from the floor on any of this? No. Don't forget you got the app or the hand, yeah? Right.
So if we talk about kind of that logistics and last mile piece, we kind of focus on some of the manufacturing world, but obviously retailers are facing immense pressures, last mile deliveries becoming particularly complex and costly, and warehousing operations we find are increasingly a burden for a customer. They can't forecast out long term, yet they want to make long term investments in automation and flexible usage. We've actually, as a good example of how we talked about some of our supply chain nimbleness, but also we try and be really nimble as a privately owned business in terms of the way that we commercialize our solutions and contract with customers. So as an example, we've just recently partnered with a private equity firm that is buying up distressed retailers. They are sometimes going through CVA process and restructuring them financially, and they don't want to have a fixed asset base in terms of warehousing. They're not really sure where that's going to look like in the future. We use our consultancy team to map that end-to-end supply chain and articulate where their demand is going to be based on forecast, and then we give them effectively a pay-as-you-go warehousing solution that allows them to flex in it up and down and not tie themselves into long-term commitments. So we've taken a view that we partner with the PE firm, and that's where the partnership is. We accept that we'll take some ups and downs on the journey, and equally they get the flexibility of the business, and we don't have to go through tenders each time they want to acquire new companies, and we can actually go in as part of that process and help them understand the end-to-end supply chain before they make the acquisition, and that helps them to educate on how much they're going to spend on that business when they take it on.
Okay, that's genius. So basically, you enable companies to go from a relatively asset-heavy business to an asset-light business.
Yeah.
Which obviously immediately has an uptick on their EBIT.
Yeah.
Which enables them to, maybe a little bit more attractive potentially.
Yeah, and you're getting into a situation then where you've got a flexibility with a partner that respects what you're bringing to them. So in terms of some of the risk around payment terms, we're able to be more flexible. We're saving them a lot of money, and so therefore they can pay us in advance. So if they're a distressed retailer, we're not concerned that we're going to lose our shirt with them.
Yeah. Okay.
Obviously, the other great demand on the retail industry increasingly is sustainability, and we are able to measure the carbon impact of a supply chain from end to end, and help our customers to really understand not only the cost impact but the carbon impact of changing the supply chain. And actually, with some of our customers, that's as important an issue as the cost is, and therefore we can flex the model to help them.
Can you help them with carbon reporting? Do you provide them with reports and so on? And you mentioned a consultative division. Can you give them consultancy support on how they can reduce their carbon footprint?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a sustainability capability within consultancy, so we can look at the supply chain, recommend, and we can go a step further. We actually produce within our technology business. So we set our technology business up to provide condition-based monitoring of heavy equipment. So most trains in the UK have a Unipart sensor on them that record its health and condition. So rather than just service it every 10,000 miles, we can tell a train operator when a particular engine needs to be serviced, and it comes in depending on the usage it's had. We've been able to repurpose that technology to give ecological insight, so we can put sensors in our own warehouses. For example, we've put sensors on all of our heavy equipment, air conditioning units, dock levelers, etc., and we're able to we use AI to monitor the usage across the site and identify that on a Saturday night somebody's left the air conditioning unit on in the warehouse, and we can then turn it off and save. And typically it's saving us about 11% on our energy consumption.
Wow. And is that a service again your consultancy team can provide to clients?
We can do it through the consultancy business, but we actually sell that directly to clients.
Right, it's a product they can buy.
Yeah, it's a product they can buy, and we'll even commercialise it in a way that allows them to we'll fund the instalment of it, and and they can recover the payment on a subscription basis.
Okay.
They sign up for 3 years and pay from the savings.
Okay.
So I guess while we all scare ourselves to death and we think that the challenges seem significant, the good news is that there are ways through it, as I've described with some of the partnerships that we have. Our key recommendation is it's all about the partnerships that you form as a retail business. If you get the right partners in place, then you can adapt and you can use and leverage each other's expertise. No one organisation has all the answers, but what we always try and do is get a strong partnership going where and we say to our clients, if you can do it better than we can, we recommend you take it on, but equally let us be open about our expertise. And our best partnerships really drive data-driven decision making and improve that whole visibility across the supply chain. Taking that intelligent optimization and the digital tools that we deploy means that ultimately we create more efficient logistics networks, and when we go as far as like our traditional partners and competitors do in terms of route planning, load optimization, network design, what we like to see is that we can do all of that together. So we'll take that whole supply and demand, we'll look at the manufacturing base, and we'll look at the logistics end to have a real end-to-end solution, and we can help our customers to understand the impact of a decision made in manufacturing and what that will do to the end customer and the end supply chain model. So our argument would be that ultimately the future of retail resilience lies in building agility. This requires us to adapt our operational models so that you can pivot really quickly. Again, it comes back to having partners that can give you flexibility in warehouse solutions and scale with demand. The best news is that at Unipart, we work with businesses to provide that expertise and the tools, give you strategic guidance, and help you navigate through turbulent times to come out more in a stronger and more adaptable way. My guidance to anybody in the retail industry that kind of has these challenges about supply chain resilience is look at it as an opportunity. If you can get the right model, somebody's going to suffer from that, and that presents you with the opportunity to step in, and that's our guidance. And if we can help in any way, then we're here to. We have a stand. We'd welcome having a conversation with you and talking about what Unipart can do in your business and help you to form a proper partnership, pretty much anywhere in the world.
Cool. Is that your last slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I've got the Q&A one. There you go. So I'm on stand E34.
Okay. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, any questions in the audience? Right. I'll bail you out and I'll ask him a question. But in the meantime, please do think of a question of your own. So you mentioned, and I love this quote, just in kind to just in case.
Yeah.
Just in time to just in case. Have you got an example? Because I didn't quite understand what you meant by just in case.
Well, I guess the immediate natural response is to say, well, okay, where we would always just deliver and have one day stock turn, for satisfying orders, actually we've got all this volatility. Now we need to hold 10 days. Right, but that's also not the right answer, right? It pushes your inventory up, it puts your
working capital tied up.
Your cash flow comes under pressure. You have to change your warehousing footprint, and actually, those kind of unilateral decisions are a bit binary, right? If you do it for one bit, you do it for all of it.
Yeah.
What we try and do is look at the supply chain and say, look, there are some parts here that are absolutely critical that you can't get away from. An engine, for example, is going to take some time to ship. So if you take one of our high-end premium sports car customers, they're very high net worth individuals. They might have the frustration of having to choose their second or third choice car on the day, right? But they don't like waiting for it, even though they've got plenty of flexibility themselves. And so they would say traditionally, well, we'll have all components for all cars available in our key markets. Right. Well, that's an incredibly expensive way to manage your supply chain. And actually, we used the AI to really look at all of their consumption patterns and look at what key components would be typically sold and produced together. And we ensured we had those kits out available in the market. And then we lowered the stock level on the other parts that were very unlikely. So we kind of gave them a bit more intelligent data to say, look, on a frequency perspective, this is how you can get that balance between service and cost.
Right. So basically what you're able to do is through AI and your own sort of knowledge and know-how, you're able to optimize when they make a sweeping statement like we want to have cover in every single key market for every single part of a McLaren, for example, and the huge cost involved in doing that you're able to deliver that promise, but in a smart way by not holding every single thing. You're predicting what's more likely to be a requirement and manage the few exceptions.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. I get it now. Now, you mentioned also nearshore product sourcing. Have you got an example about, and I guess it's a combination of COVID plus, does everybody remember the container crisis and, second-hand cars went up in value because you couldn't get new cars and safety and all this stuff. So a lot of companies look to near source because of that. Also, there's the volatility in certain geographical areas in terms of stability, geopolitics and all of that stuff. So can you give me an example, give the audience an example of how you've helped a client near source and what was the factor that drove that request from the client?
Yeah, so it's the same problem, but in the other way around. So we had a client that had a long-term partnership for production of a particular component. They changed their volumes, and as a result, the supplier couldn't make it viable to have that level of volume just in that one market, and they actually retracted. And when the contract came for renewal, said, "We're not going to produce that here. We're going to ship it." The problem was the product was shipped in a way that made it a lot more expensive in the way that it was packaged. We actually were able to then step in and work with that supplier for the core element of it. So it was a bumper on a car. But what they didn't want to do is the sub-assembly work and the finish work. So we're able to get them to ship the main component in bulk to the UK. We then did the sub-assembly of it in the UK for them and stepped into the contract. And then so the supplier could keep the main volumes coming, but we then produced some of the parts ourselves within our manufacturing capability, assembled it, and then delivered it to the customer. So we picked up revenue. The supplier was able to maintain an economic supply route, and ultimately the customer kept their production going.
Okay, brilliant. Have you thought of any questions? Is that it? Yeah, awesome. Right. Hang on, I'm going to throw this so that everybody can hear the question, right? Are you ready? Yeah. Right, you ready to catch? There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So you mentioned automation. I'm really interested in the tipping point for you when you're looking at a contract to whether you invest in automation or not. What sort of factors do you have to weigh up to decide?
So can I ask you, who are you? And
I'm from Swisslog.
Swisslog.
So yeah, we do automation, but I'm fascinated.
Yeah.
Jim's insight into this.
Yeah, it's a really good question, right? Because I think that's probably what's held back, particularly in the logistics industry, it's held back investment. I think typically contracts are procured on kind of 3 or 5 year terms. The payback is somewhere between 5 and 10 years, on a lot of fixed automation. The more modular stuff is making it a bit easier. For us, we've taken a slightly different approach, which is we backed ourselves on how we could reuse that automation. So, it's quite hard to change a customer decision on it. But we're saying, well, actually, if we take a punt and we invest in an AMR solution, for example, that client might only back us for 3 years. But how well do we think we're going to do, and how likely are they to stay on? So we'd look at that factor, and then we'd say, is it flexible enough that we could use it for another client? And is it within our core base? So trying to get away from trying to link that one customer contract with that one piece of automation and say, well, actually, is it generic enough that we should use it in a core sector? And so we wouldn't it probably means that you won't deploy it everywhere with every customer, but you are focusing on your profitable core where there's repeat business that you could go after.
Yeah, and do you see more automation in shared user sites?
Yeah, so that's actually our latest deployment is in a multi-user environment, and we actually we identified we could have put it into one of 3 sites with 7 different customers. We decided one customer is particularly keen to invest with us and go for it, but we know, again, that kind of backup, we knew that we had the opportunity to flex into other customers if need be.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks for the insight.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Any other questions from the back? Well, you've got the dice on the floor. That's a no then. Okay. Do you want to chuck it back? Thank you. Right. I've got a question sort of on the extending from the last question there. So how do you, from a strategy point of view, we talked earlier when I visited you on your stand, and you gave me a really good example of modular NHS and wards. Can you share that story with the group?
Yeah, sure. So we're in what I think is going to be a really exciting project for those of us in the UK, something we can be proud of in our NHS. So the traditional way of building hospitals was an NHS trust would get money from the government, find replace a hospital or, the land, and they would build a hospital. Actually, there are 29 hospitals that need replacing across the NHS over the next 10 years, and the government has taken that centrally and said, we're going to standardise the way we manufacture. They went out to tender. We formed a consortium using our consultancy business, along with some major building contractors, and we're now responsible for the industrialisation of the components within the hospital programme. So in a traditional ward, you would, where we've probably all been, unfortunately, at some point in our lives, probably were born in, you're in an open plan kind of place with a curtain that pulls round. The future hospitals will have individual rooms for each patient, and within them will be a bathroom, right? The bathroom will be the same in every one of those wards, in every one of those 29 hospitals. and it'll be made in a factory environment, so the quality standards will be better, the overall cost of inserting them will be cheaper, and Unipart's actually industrializing that process and using our just-in-time automotive heritage to standardize the way they're manufactured and shipped to the build site, so that they're inserted. And you see this already in the commercial world, right? You know, if you can watch a McDonald's being built, comes off the back of a flatbed trailer, right? And it's built in 3 days. That's that model, but on a massive scale. Each one of those hospitals has a build spend of around £1 billion.
Wow.
So you can see that, you know, using that, I think it's a great example of cross-sector pollination of ideas and ways of working.
I think it's brilliant. It blew me away when I heard that example. And that concept, if you like, of applying sort of process and industrial production know-how, you can move into other sectors. I'm sure you can imagine potentially schools. I know schools can sometimes build, but you could do that with the classroom, couldn't you?
Yeah, and you look at the future, right? So the cleaning up of the water systems, you know, and the investment required in that as we replace a Victorian legacy. The building of the mini nuclear reactors, which is going to go on across, you know, the governments are now announced. A significant uplift in defence spending. You know, all of those are opportunities, you know, for us to take that and help the public purse.
So you're a 1 billion group at the moment, right? And most people know Unipart in your introduction, for example, for the brand on automotive, you know, screen wash and other products, but also obviously the logistics arm. And when we spoke earlier, we talked about almost like merging Venn diagram. You know, you've got logistics and the know-how in terms of supply chain combined with now production and industrial know-how. So what's next? What can you see over the horizon in terms of how could you take this, the 1 billion British-owned group, to, I don't know, 2 billion in the next 5 years?
Well, my boss tells me I've got to take it to 2 billion.
You
know, he's ambitious. But I think it will be, you know, what we've historically operated as individual siloed businesses, right? And there was a strategy behind that. It was if the logistics industry took a hit, the rail industry would pull them through. But actually what's happened is all of those markets have consolidated, and now as a logistics business, we're up against some global behemoths that have their value props that we can't compete with. You know, they can provide a standardized service in every country in the world if need be. Well, we can't do that, right? But what we can do is differentiate ourselves and manufacture product and combine it with a logistics footprint, which no one else can do. So, you know, we've had examples where we provided the logistics to a manufacturer. They had a problem in their supply chain. During the renewal process, we put our consultancy team in to optimize the way that their manufacturing footprint worked. Through that, we acquired part of their supply chain, and now we manufacture and do the logistics services. And, you know, they're kind of one-offs at the minute, but I see this future where, take that hospitals program, in that 1 billion spend, there's about 140 million of spend of product that we actually make within our construction business. So we designed it in our consultancy business, we manufacture it, and then we'll use our logistics capability to deliver it on a just-in-time basis to a building site. You know, that's the perfect vision for me, because then we're really sticky with our customer and we're providing them with a value add that our competitors can't bring.
Yeah. One of the examples you gave earlier was Apple and the phone contract, you know, the fixing and returning of phones. So that kind of, because that must have been quite fiercely competed for. How did you win that?
It was giving them confidence that we could leverage our manufacturing capability in, okay, it's low skill level manufacturing, but it's repair and triage, right? It's actually a lot more, there's a lot more engineering know-how in it than there is logistics know-how. And so using the Unipart way to bring standard consistency and quality to the end-to-end service and our commercial adaptability. Can you imagine the changes that Apple have gone through in the last, we've operated them for nearly 20 years. And now they've taken us to Saudi Arabia. So although the UK service is, you know, kind of more standard product, in Saudi Arabia they've got gold cases and they've got their name engraved on the back of it, and we're deploying that service for them as well and doing product launch out there.
Wow. Okay, so we're into almost our last minute now. So final message from you, if you wanted to sort of crystallize, the next 5 years for Unipart, in terms of where you want to take it as a business and how you're going to make those two components work even better together. Just summarize.
I think we're going to see a big expansion into our public sector footprint, particularly in defence. I think that's an area where we can bring some real value. We're going to work with our existing automotive customers as they go through the electrification process and change the way that we can use our technology to help them provide new services as customer demand changes. And in the retailing e-commerce market, I think we're going to be an entry point for new entrants in e-commerce who want to go from manufacturing products to supplying their own customers directly rather than going through a marketplace model, and we can give them that flexibility of warehousing. But overall, I think we'll have a lot more of our customers having more than one capability from Unipart.
Brilliant. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, the fabulous four musketeers who stuck with us. Right, the first beer later on, or glass of wine, is on me. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you for your question at the front as well, and thank you, Jim, for being so honest and agile with your responses.
Thank you.